Thank you very much, colleagues, friends, Toshaos. First of all, allow me to welcome you to Georgetown and express the hope that the next few days we can spend deliberating on the issues that matter most to you and your communities. This year, we're meeting at a peculiar and sad moment. We're in the middle of what I consider a national tragedy. As all of you are aware, 2 nights ago, we got a distress call from the ferry that was on its way to Port Kaituma. And a number of people also managed to send voice notes that the ferry was sinking. Immediately, we mobilized everyone, the Army, the police, through the standing arrangements for search and rescue that are part of the national protocol. And I want to assure you that the entire cabinet from 11, the moment we got that message, every member of the cabinet was up throughout the night. The president was abroad. He joined the cabinet group. And we were in constant communication with the Coast Guard and others, talking to them about deploying immediately, which they did. And they got to the site just after 2 a.m. because they had that vessel that came, the Coast Guard deployment from the Pomeroon. Those we deployed from Georgetown got there about half an hour later. And since then, we've been in a search and rescue mode. And until now, we are still hopeful and we are not discontinuing that effort. We're still fully mobilized with the hope that we'd have many more survivors than those who were rescued. In the course of yesterday, we discovered something unusual because we were working with the manifest that Transport and Harbor gave us. They had on that manifest 116 passengers and 17 crew members and a defined amount of cargo. But when the rescue effort was ongoing, we discovered in the course of the day and by evening that you had a large number of people who were rescued but not on the manifest. So that immediately told us that people were on the boat, placed on the boat, that they didn't include in the manifest. We believe that's illegal. In fact, it's illegal. Immediately, we convened a joint investigating task force comprising MARAD, the police, and the Army. And as I'm speaking now, they're working. They managed to get the video footages of people when they're loading the boat. And they're interviewing some of the crew members as well as some of the people who survived but were not on the manifest to find out how did they get on, who put them on the vessel. If there are going to be consequences for people who did this. When we rescued the crew members, we decided immediately when they were seeking medical attention to take some blood from them yesterday in the course of the day. And we found 2 of those crew members. They had marijuana traces in their blood, and they're under police custody now. So we're right now trying to determine who was on the boat that we don't have the names for because their names are not on the manifest. And that's why we're hoping the investigation would help us to determine this, as well as last night, we put out a hotline to ask people who know that their family members were on the boat but may not have seen their names in the manifest or the rescue list to contact us so that we can know what we are dealing with. So that's where we are now. The president is right now in Region 1. He went to Port Kaituma and Mabaruma, and he is now left for Essequibo Coast, where a number of people from Region 1 have gone to, waiting to hear word from their relatives. As a result of this, we could not continue with the opening ceremony, so that will be done tomorrow morning. President shall speak tomorrow, the opening ceremony. I just met with the Toshaos of the affected areas, and I said to them, some of them opted to go back to their communities or their coast, and I told them we are making arrangements for that to happen now, and I told them that they're not going to be left out, even if they're not here, from the deliberations of the NTC, that we'll meet with them separately to listen to all of their concerns and hopefully address them. Now, it's a sad, sad moment in which we are meeting, but we have to continue even in these circumstances because you came out here to work with us to advance your villages and the people in your villages. Now, I was supposed to speak tomorrow afternoon, and normally I don't just speak as Vice President, but as General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party. And you know, we just came out. This is the first time we're meeting after the general elections last year, in which the PPP increased its number of seats in the parliament, significant increase in the number of seats we got in parliament. We had a 1-seat majority, and now we have a 7-seat majority in the parliament. This is important because it's a testimony to that we're on the right course in trying to change our country. The development of our country is not an easy task, and development doesn't come overnight, as many of you would be aware as Toshaos and leaders in your villages. We have had to walk a long road together from one of the poorest countries in the world, one of the most heavily indebted countries in the world, to today, one of the shining examples of how a country should manage progressively its economy and its national affairs. In the course of the last 20 years, we have transformed that from a sick man to now the healthiest economy in the world, I dare say. And from a sick economy. And we did so even with lots of provocations. We have had electoral-related violence and negative views from the opposition constantly. The gripe, they can do better. They tried it in 2015, and we saw the results of that. And we hear it all the time, just thinking that just going out and holding a microphone is solving a problem. It requires deliberate long-term planning. And we are progressing. You are all testimony to the progress of not only our country, but what has been happening in your communities. You've seen the changes. But it's a work in progress. We're not at the end point as yet. And for those who believe, you hear it every day, oh, we're an oil-producing country, so we should be rich, everybody should be rich. And I keep saying to them, and I said to you previously, that until this year, now in this year's budget, all of the oil money that we collected can't fund 40% of our budget. Every cent of oil money that we collected can't fund 40% of our budget. So for those who think we have all of this extra oil money, it's not even enough to fund half of our budget. And you can check the numbers. I've said this publicly, I'm saying it here. Nobody will dispute me nationally because it's the truth. You just have to go and check the budget. And so one thing we have done, though, is to ensure that people who live in the hinterland, the Amerindian communities, that they too have been able to have access to progress and fair share of the resources. In fact, outside of our increase in public spending on things like education and healthcare and infrastructure, which you have seen in your communities, we have been able to directly allocate funds to the villages through the LCDS that we earn. For the villages to spend this money in a way that the people of the villages see fit. And that has yielded enormous benefits to people, with over 3,000 projects in these 250-something villages we have being completed. And that's a great testimony to also your management capability. It's not easy. Sometimes we have great faith in people who come from abroad to manage things. We give the UNDP and others money to manage projects in Amerindian villages. And I can tell you my example, a few examples of how slow these have been. We still have projects that we gave were managed by the UNDP since 2011, when we got the money from the first LCDS, and they have not been completed as yet. And you've been able, in 3 years, to get about over $14 billion from the LCDS, $14 billion. And you have used the money, and you have used it in an accountable way based on the wishes of your community, and you've implemented the projects. If we had given the external agencies, it would take 100 years to do what you, the people and leadership of these villages, have done in 3 short years. And it's a perfect example of good governance and hard work at the village level. And we should really write up this experience to demonstrate to the world, those who believe we have to rely on external people to manage our affairs or to intermediate these funds. They should learn about what we have done in Guyana through your efforts. So we have made a lot of progress. But as I said before, it's not an easy road. We have identified the long term, where we would like to go as a country and as villages. We've outlined in our manifesto in 2025 a number of areas that we want to work with you on to progress the country and address the concerns of our people. But before I talk a bit about that, because the discussion we're going to have just now will be about those issues and how we can work with you to get them implemented, I want to say to you that people often don't recognize the progress we've made in certain areas. In 2020, when we resumed office, the biggest cry among our people was jobs, here on the coast too, mainly, not just the hinterland. Hinterland, we've always had a problem with getting more jobs, but along the coast, jobs. Right now, in 6 years, because of our focus on the economy heavily, we have labor shortages across the whole coast. In the hinterland, it's slightly different. We still have unemployment in many of the villages, and today, one of the things we'll be discussing is how we can work with you to generate more employment opportunities in the villages. But that's a major progress now across the country. People are finding work, they can work easily. Secondly, we have increased our spending